Welcome to Our National Conversation, a podcast in which we discuss politics from all angles. We are completely nonpartisan and all views respectfully stated are welcomed here. Our podcast is unique in that we blend the energy and passion of our student interns with the insights and wisdom that come from experienced professionals. Our focus is on problem solving, not finger pointing.
My name is Jordan Broking, and I serve as the Director of Media here at ONC. Now, in today's discussion, we're going to touch upon a hot topic that's starting to rise across different international ways when it comes to animal testing. We've heard it more so being discussed in the beauty industry, with some beauty brands starting to back away from animal testing, but others say there's some pros to it. So, what is the finite solution or answers to this when we're discussing this? We're going to get into that and so much more when it comes to the topic in today's discussion. But first, let me introduce our panelists. Today, we are joined by professional Sally Thompson-Iritani. Sally, would you mind introducing yourself to those who are listening?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me here today. I'm Sally Thompson-Iritani. I am with the University of Washington. At the University of Washington, I am the Assistant Vice Provost, and I oversee a program with three components: animal care, outreach, and 3 Rs. And our animal care program is designed around how we care and support the use of animals in several different types of research, from biomedical to conservation research. We have an outreach program. We also have a 3 Rs program focused on the reduction, refinement, and replacement of the use of animals in biomedical research. So I oversee those programs here at the University of Washington, and I'm delighted to be here to talk with you today.
Yeah, so thank you. And after this discussion, I'll probably be asking you a few questions about University of Washington, because I actually have a friend who lives very close to that campus. So we can get into a little quick discussion about that afterwards. So thank you, Sally, for introducing yourself. And we are also joined today by ONC's Science, Environment, and Technology team lead, Vidit Iyer. Vidit, would you also please introduce yourself?
Yeah, so hi, I'm Vidit. As Jordan said earlier, I'm the Science, Environment, and Technology team lead. I've been at ONC for around a year now, and I've been team lead for 2 months, and I've thoroughly enjoyed my time here. I've done a lot of things, from podcasts to op-eds, some policy proposals, and I look forward to continuing to contribute in that way. I'm a junior currently at West Windsor Plainsboro High School South, and I'm looking to apply to college next year, which is pretty cool. And I feel like this internship will help me a lot right now and in that process and further on in life too. So I'm really glad that I'm an intern here at Our National Conversation.
Well, thank you, Vidit, and we're happy to have you here. So let's get the conversation started. Sally, I'll turn to you first, as our in-house professional when it comes to animal science and animal care. So when we're talking about animal testing, there's, obviously some scrutiny, but also some people just maybe not understanding what the full definition or practice of animal testing is. So would you mind kind of describing what that is for those who may not know entirely what we're talking about?
Yeah, and I think, getting some clarification around this topic is really important, because we're talking about, when we say animal testing, it's actually a really specific term. Animal testing refers to the testing where we utilize animal models to determine whether something is, like a product that's made, is safe and efficacious. And we use the animal models before it goes into humans or further. There's also animal research, which is really a different term. And sometimes these things kind of get conflated together because there's fundamental research where we're trying to understand a basic biological process. And then there's actual animal testing, like I say, which is where a product has been developed. There's a thought that it could have a real utility in both health and safety for humans and or animals. And so developing that is actually when we refer to animal testing. So I just wanted to clarify some of those terms. I think the use of animals in research is a very broad term. And as I mentioned, kind of within our program, we have research that is done both in laboratories and to support biomedical research, but we also have conservation research. And I think a lot of times people don't understand there's all those different components. We also have a very large program that's looking at the it's called the Healthy Dog Aging Project, which is looking at our pet population, and I have 2 dogs of my own, and how they're aging. And as we understand how dogs age, it gives us information about even how people age or how different species age. So there's several components to this. I think, like I said, that I want to kind of clarify there's all of these fitting together, and how we relate with animals and how we work with animals in this environment actually contains a lot of different components. So I think, when we talk about this, we should be sure to clarify all of those components here.
Definitely, absolutely. Because I know personally for me, whenever I hear animal testing, I just thought maybe 1 or 2 of those components that you mentioned. I didn't know it was also, looking at the lifespan of these animals and also kind of seeing how those are impacted by, this animal testing and making sure that, that the products that they're being tested for are going to be safe for, human ingest or anyone else to really take and use. So for both of you in this discussion, how has animal testing contributed to the advancement of treatments for both diseases and new drugs? We can even throw in the beauty industry there, just because that, as I said earlier, that's becoming a more, pop culture phenomenon where a lot of brands are starting to announce that, we're cruelty free. We're not trying to do animal testing anymore. And that's, a whole other question right there when it comes to what is cruelty free. But going back to just the initial question, how has animal testing contributed to the advancement of science in this regard? And both of you could answer this. Whoever wants to start first, you can start.
Yeah, I would love for Vidit to start first. I think maybe just hearing from him, since you heard from me already, would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, sure. So just to give a brief overview, so in some ways that it's helped is obviously with they can better understand and develop treatments for things like cancer, neurological disorders, heart attacks and heart disease and things like that. But also in other areas too, like certain vaccines. They can also animal testing has also helped with things like influenza, measles, and other types of vaccines. So has broad application in that sense. And in addition, they can also have valuable impacts on things like drugs, because again, certain testing for drugs can also be used in animal testing. So in general, there's a wide variety of medical applications that animal testing has been used for. Because at least as humans, we think that they're the best. They can give us the best results testing animals but at the same time, we're not putting humans at risk. And that's why we can test these certain medical things like vaccines and drugs on animals before humans, just to see their potential impacts.
Yeah, wow. Vidit did a spectacular job of really summarizing, I think, how important the role of animals have had in really developing safe and efficacious therapies. Fantastic job. So I think to add to that, Jordan, one of the things you asked about was the cosmetics industry. And I think that, understanding that, I think we all have a lot of different feelings and opinions about how those things are. But I think we also need to look historically, where there was a time in history when cosmetics were being developed that had some pretty severe impacts on people when they used them, and people didn't understand what that looked like. So this is when animal testing was used to determine whether cosmetic products were safe, was based on the fact that there were some adverse outcomes. Now, we are in an age of technological advancements that are advancing so rapidly. It's so cool, right? So I think, one of the things is that we have actually been able to do a lot of things that we actually used to use animals for safety testing as cosmetics. We've been able to move those to non-animal models and still have the confidence that they're safe. So this is when we talk about putting a non-animal model into this paradigm shift. We need to make sure that it's a validated non-animal model that's giving us similar results to what we were seeing in the animal model. And so this is, like I say, where I think the cosmetic industry has made major strides in figuring out how they can incorporate non-animal models into that development. And also a lot of the things, the ingredients that go into a cosmetic product, those raw ingredients have been tested in animals. And they've been tested throughout time, and they've been determined to be safe at certain levels in animals. So to say that animals weren't involved in developing that is a little bit of a misrepresentation, because we need to recognize the role that they played. It's great if we don't have to use animals anymore, but the fact that they maybe were used at one time, we still need to recognize and respect that, in my personal opinion. So I think it's great that we can use technology whenever possible to develop these non-animal models and feel that we can have a safe and efficacious product that we can use. But I think we also need to recognize that those non-animal models are developed and validated on our information that we gained from our animal models.
Interesting. As I think, a few times when we are talking about the, alternatives, as you mentioned, I think a lot of people think that, they must be different because they're an alternative. Like it says in the name, but that's not the case whatsoever. So going into that, what are some alternative methods available that can replace or reduce the need really for animal testing as science further progresses, as you said earlier, as science is advancing, we're getting all these new different cool, different methods of doing this. So what are some of these alternative methods?
I'll go first, and then Vidit, would you like to go first? That would be fantastic.
Oh yeah, sure. I think like the model like where I kind of like provide like a basic overview and you go more in depth works because of your expertise in this field. So one of the key examples that I guess I'm gonna bring out is like things like computer models and like simulations, because these things like these models can basically simulate like the effects of like certain drug tests and vaccines because of like the amount of like math involved in it and statistics. And so these things models of like organs, tissues, and they can show like the effects of certain substances on certain diseases and how they would affect humans as well. And obviously these are much more reliable than, I mean, not much more reliable, much more ethically better than testing animals, because if you can do a computer simulation accurately, you're not harming an animal. And so this is one of the key things that as computer simulations and data and technology gets better and better, we can hopefully increase the reliability and efficacy of these certain models, and hopefully that continues on.
Yeah, again, a fantastic job. I'm very impressed with your knowledge of this area. It's quite spectacular. So I would just add to that. I kind of look at it as a few different things where we can really replace and reduce the use of animal models. And the replacements, as Vidit did such a great job of articulating, computer simulations and simulation models are spectacular. Even some of the things we have built mannequins to use for trainings and stuff, like they're impressive. And I've actually just last week went and looked at some of them that we had developed here at the university. And they are such a great resource for doing these initial trainings and actually decreasing our reliance on animal models, particularly for training and other certain things. And so I think that the one thing I would emphasize there is that, again, these weren't, these are based on the fact that we have this knowledge of how these things work. And often we gain this knowledge from the use of animal models previously. So it's great that we can move away from them, but the animal models really contributed to where we're at. The other thing I think bringing up is these microphysiological systems that some people call them organ on a chip. Like, they are really cool. They have developed like a simulated kidney model that's on a little chip, and these can simulate what would happen in the kidney. So they can look at how a compound is impacting the kidney itself. Or they can look at, they have liver on a chip, they have brain on a chip, they have lung on a chip, they have all of these different organs. Now, the challenge, as all of you are going to know, is that I can't just look at how it impacts your liver, because in order for it to get to your liver, it has to go through a lot of different systems. And then after it leaves your liver, it's going to go to a lot of different places, right? So your liver is one stop, but there's so many other stops within your body. That's what we can't quite simulate yet, is that whole body action. We're trying to, and even some of the these microphysiological systems are connecting different organ systems to try to see, like, if it goes from your liver through your bloodstream to your kidney, how does that metabolism look, and what does that look like when we're looking at how that that compound or therapy might impact how your body's going to respond to it. So these are really breakthroughs. And regardless, if we can get information that that compound is toxic in a liver model, then we're not going to take it into an animal model or anything else. So it does really help us reduce our reliance on animal models if we've already determined its toxicity before we even get to the animal model.
Yeah,
Yeah,
adding to
go
what
for
Sally said, something else that came up is like things like called microdosing. So like yeah, again, they basically just like take small amounts of like whatever the substance and the drug or whatever vaccine or whatever, and they kind of inject it in humans. And then I think these days we have the technology to be able to see some of the effects of that. So it's similar to like how like I guess a vaccine is used in small doses to sort of like you use it in small doses to try to train the human body in the same not exactly in the same way, but you kind of put these things in small doses such that you can analyze the impact. And I'm guessing now we have the technology to go deeper in and go beyond surface level of just like symptomatically and really use x-rays or other types of technologies to see what's actually going on when you put these small samples of whatever's in and whatever the intended test is for. And that could be a viable way of doing it. Now, I'm guessing the only concern is that if it goes seriously wrong, even in the small doses, it can obviously have serious consequences. But obviously, this would ideally be even better than computer simulations and anything else because you can find a way to test these things on humans with it being safe. That's the ultimate goal.
And so you bring up humans. That's the perfect segue to another question I have when it comes to this, because I think also when it comes to us thinking about treatment for diseases and other impacts, I think most people, when they hear that, they think of more so, the physical, these debilitating diseases, where that's, or not even debilitating, just, Mucinex or like any type of, like other, over-the-counter medicine. But what are the advantages of using animal models for studying, both human physiology, but also, mental disease and also, just any other type of disease? Because obviously, again, like I think people want to hear all this stuff, they're thinking more so how it's going to affect, the solutions that can kind of be, solved with over-the-counter medicine or something else that can really, impact, a physical disease. But when we're talking about, the full body and everything, what are the advantages using an animal model for that? Because as Sally said earlier, sometimes when it comes to these alternatives, they can just test out the liver, but doesn't really mention, how it impacts other organs of the body whatsoever. So how do we go into that when it comes to, determining the usage or the advantages of animal testing for that?
I guess I can start, and then Vida, please jump in. So I think one of the things that you mentioned, Jordan, that I think is something that we really want to spend time thinking about is how do we measure kind of some of these things with mental health and neurodegenerative diseases, because modeling those in a non-animal model, we don't know how to do it. We have not figured out how to model those. And even the animal models, we have some actually fairly decent animal models of some of these things, but we're continuing development. And how do we model something like Alzheimer's disease in an animal model, Parkinson's disease? There's some of these things that are devastating neurodegenerative diseases or neurodegenerative problems that we're trying to understand. And mental health problems and how we can help with some of those, and understanding the biochemistry behind those is becoming, when I was growing up, we kind of had mental health put into a different category. Now we're really understanding that there is biology and biochemistry behind that, and molecular interactions behind these things, and behind some of the things that are happening for people who are struggling with these diseases and with addiction. There's so much more behind this than we ever thought, and we need to really learn that, but we cannot at this point in time simulate that in a non-animal model. And the utility of the animal models is that they provide us a little bit of control over the situation, over the model, and being able to reproduce it and replicate what's happening. And then we can actually really try to understand down to the molecular level what might be going on. So that's where I think these models are still incredibly important. And right now we need to rely on them to help us with this.
Yeah, adding on to what Sally said, I mean, this may or may not be true, but I'm pretty sure like a genetic analysis, when you mentioned things like mental health and all, they're gonna require more animal testing because I think they're a lot harder to predict using computer simulations right now than things at like the molecular level. And I think that's why certain animal testing methods are still viable. And also when you want to think of things like, say, like for like the, if like a company is going out there and trying to make a drug or a vaccine, as of now, the most reliable way would still be to use animal testing. So in that sense, the company at the end of the day is trying to make money, right? So if they're trying to do that, the best thing they can do for themselves is to try and obviously get the product out there as soon as possible and use the most reliable testing. Now, obviously that has ethical downsides, but given that we're in like a capitalistic society, I'd say that there are probably a lot of companies that still have incentives as of now to do animal testing, given that I don't think we've crossed the gap where other alternatives are completely better. As Sally mentioned, there are still some cases in which we need animal testing. And for those cases, it might be a lot harder for companies to switch given the financial benefits that they'd have by continuing with animal testing.
And now, how reliable are the results of animal testing when it comes to, predicting and also actually maybe even, being super accurate when it comes to how, drugs may impact the human body? Because again, humans and animals can be somewhat, different organisms. I know there's been some more recent arguments saying that some animals that are used have similar body chemistry or kind of body deposition when it comes to how, medication or other products can react to both them and human bodies. So how reliable are the results when it comes to this?
Yeah, I think that's something that we all are trying to figure out, like what is the reliability around this and the extrapolation. So one thing that I bring up a lot is I'm trained as a veterinarian. As veterinarians, we're trained to think about things comparatively rather than to think that and one species is going to model another one. We're trained to think about their differences and their similarities. And that's also what we do in animal models. So we can see where they might be similar, where they really might accurately model what's going on with humans, but where they're different is actually really good information also, because we know that dogs cannot eat chocolate, but people can. And we do. And yet if a dog eats the same amount of chocolate, it can have a really severe effect on them. So knowing those differences and knowing some of those enzymes or where those things are particular is really, it's actually adds to our bank of information is kind of how I look at it. We're adding to our information bank and trying to understand. So that's why most products are required to be tested on 2 species, both a smaller rodent model and then a large animal model. And as we continue to develop non-animal models, like, we can increase that bank of information that we have, because we know that there are species differences and we know that some things might extrapolate directly and some things there might be differences, but understanding those differences is equally as important as understanding where they're similar. And the other thing I would add is there's a lot of times where people are saying, well, when we look at the research pipeline, animals are not predicting what happens in humans. We don't honestly know for a lot of things, because a lot of things don't go to humans because they're not safe or efficacious in our animal model. So if they are not safe or efficacious, they don't go forward. That doesn't mean they failed. That means that we determined that they shouldn't go forward. Now, of course, there are some things that do go forward into human clinical trials that still don't show the efficacy or the safety that we saw in our animal models. And that's additional information. Like I say, to me, like that is more information we're adding to our data bank so that we can make sure that we're developing new therapies and understanding these things. What's unique about the human? What's unique about the animal? We have to develop therapies and for animals also. I have, like I say, I've told you I have 2 dogs, I have 2 cats. I want them to be safe and healthy. So I want safe and healthy therapies and treatments and vaccines for them also. So I want to know what's different and why I can't give them the same therapy that I would give to my child, right? So it's really understanding both of those, I think, is really critical. And I think sometimes that point gets missed.
Oh yeah, to add on to that, so one thing that, again, obviously differences in species exist, but another factor that I hypothesize could be true, and this relates more to biology. So there's certain different types of species called K-selected species and R-selected species. And what do you call it? Humans, elephants, and like a lot of those animals are K-selected, whereas things like typically tested, like I guess rodents, will be R-selected. But the thing is that I feel like and this is just a hypothesis because I'm not an expert on this field, but I think I know a little bit about it. So if you were to test more K-selected species like humans, the problem is that and from an ethical perspective, it would be far worse, given that there's far fewer of these species, because K-selected species typically reproduce at a way slower rate than our selected species, but they also have longer lifespans. So if you're conducting tests on K-selected species, you're also going to impact a larger population size than if you were to do it on our selected species. And it's also would be a far bigger like ethical concern, because typically K-selected species to an extent might be more enduring than certain are, because like our selected species might be like rodents and all. No one would really care about that as much as like a elephant or something like that. So in that sense, certain tests, even though humans, it might be better to test certain animals. I'm not exactly sure based on the genetic compound. I'm not exactly sure about that, but even though it might be better, testing rodents might be the best that we have right now in the sense from an ethical standpoint. But I agree that in that sense, if we can switch to that, if we can switch to other testing methods, that would be far better, because either way, we still don't know how similar we are to other animals exactly, and there's still far more advances in that field. So even though humans and monkeys might be similar, I don't think anyone's really wants to do animal testing on monkeys, given that the potential impact that they could have.
And now, can you provide some of the significant discoveries or even breakthroughs that were made through animal testing? I know definitely history classes or biology classes, we definitely heard one or two down the road when we were in middle school or high school, but maybe for those who either, forgot that lesson years ago, depending on how long ago they went into the high school system, or those who just maybe, zone that part of their biology classes out. What are some of these like significant breakthroughs that we can think of when it comes to animal testing?
I think Vidit did a really good job at the beginning of mentioning some of them, but I think if we think about vaccines have been really breakthroughs. And I know the COVID vaccine in and of itself is controversial, but the development of a messenger RNA vaccine in a year and a half, making it available to a human population, was only possible because of 3 decades of research of developing messenger RNA, making sure that we understood what messenger RNA was, we understood it was safe, we understood all of these things about the RNA vaccine. So to me, like that recent breakthrough, I don't think people really appreciate the significance of that. And that was built on decades of research. I know a lot of us think about the polio vaccine. That was very significant. A lot of the other thing I would say is diabetes treatment and being able to live well into old age with diabetes was not possible without the use of animals in research and the development of that. Certainly even antibiotics, and determining what's safe and efficacious antibiotics, not only for us, but also for our pets and our agricultural animals and everything. All of those things really came to be because of animal research. So there are more, but I can stop there and let Vidit take a turn.
Oh yeah, no. So Sally mentioned a couple of them, but yeah, according to the Foundation for Biomedical Research, it's gonna be more specific. So things like, so research for certain animals like cows helped with, ending smallpox. Studies with again things like monkeys and dogs helped. The polio vaccine, I think I mentioned that earlier. But in addition to vaccine, also certain drugs to help currently diseases that don't have vaccines like HIV, Alzheimer's, hepatitis. Malaria does have a vaccine, but I don't think it's consistent. It's not like the same as like the others. But animal testing has been done, and animal research, especially on things like primates, has been done to help with these help develop drugs for these diseases. And yeah, I'm sure there's a plethora of others, but you hear some of the big ones, given that like malaria, HIV, Alzheimer's are huge diseases. And obviously the big one is also cancer, because although we don't have a cancer vaccine, a lot of the research that's been done to help with the drugs and cures for cancer have been related to animal testing and animal research that's gone into the development of these drugs.
Very cool, very insightful as well. And so I'm just going to bring up an analogy that I don't think a lot of people use it anymore nowadays. Because I haven't heard in a while. I think the last time I heard it was probably when I was in middle school or elementary school. But a lot of people, I think, would consider this debate when it comes to animal testing almost as the devil and angel on the shoulders, as it comes to, you know, the pros and cons of this. So using this analogy, the devil and angel on the shoulder, what or would do the pros outweigh the cons, or do the cons outweigh the pros nowadays? What are we starting to see when it comes to the further development of this field when it comes to animal testing, the future of it? Do we see the pros starting to outweigh the cons, or the cons starting to outweigh the pros? Is it kind of on an equilibrium right now? What are we seeing?
Oh, I think there's a clear answer to this relatively, at least in my opinion. Obviously you'd like to hope things like specifically computer simulations get good enough to the point where you can use enough data to extrapolate future like predictions and stuff like that on how drugs are gonna work, and drugs and vaccines are gonna work, and hopefully they can get advanced enough and use potentially artificial intelligence and machine learning to help predict with that. So hopefully advances in those fields, because there are clear advances in those fields going on right now. So the hope is that we can use advances in those fields to replace animal testing. So I wouldn't necessarily say, maybe like right now it could be close to like an equilibrium, assuming that artificial intelligence progresses at well, I guess if obviously artificial intelligence doesn't progress that much, but given at the rate at which it is progressing, I think we're going to start to see a shift in the use of animal testing compared to non-animal testing methods, especially computer simulations.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, you know, technology is moving us ahead in all the right directions, I think, and so I really look forward to incorporating non-animal models whenever possible. We're not there yet for many things, so you know, but I think that we're all anxiously, you know, looking forward to that. Everybody I work with who interacts with these animals every day, they really care about these animals. And so they also, I will tell you, they do their job because they care about the animals and they care about the science. And they all look forward to the day when there are alternatives and it's no longer necessary. So I just want to reiterate that I'm inspired and impressed every day by the people that I work with who go in every day and take care of these animals, and they are, I think Viditha kind of mentioned, you know, how we do that and the regulations around that. We have a lot of regulations and alignment with that and compliance and oversight for ensuring that we take really good care of these animals. But even without all of that, we have a lot of really, really invested people. And those invested people go in every day and provide for these animals. And that to me is one of the most impressive things, because they really care and they want to make sure that we're doing the best science possible with the best care for the animals. And then as we develop these all non-animal models and they become validated and acceptable, we all look forward to moving to that into that paradigm shift.
Definitely. And to kind of wrap up our conversation here a little bit, let's just imagine, you know, 50 years from now, you know, we're all still kind of, you know, checking out how, you know, timing is going when it comes to this field, any type of changes that might be made, any more advancements. So when it comes to, you know, the field of 50 years from now, 100 years from now, just in the far off future, not even near future, where do we see this industry, you know, sitting as far as, you know, when it comes to testing out medicines or testing out other products, you know, that people use on a regular basis? You know, where do we see this field going?
I guess I see it being completely using computer simulations and AI. Well, although I don't know how humanity is going to look in 100 years, but I can pretty confidently say it probably won't be using animal testing nowhere near as much. Maybe there's a few exceptions where they might have to, but I'm sure it's going to be so few, because like in most of the cases you won't even need animal testing due to other computer simulations being better. But I'm sure there might be like, I'm not an expert in the field, so there might be a few cases where even though we can make a switch, we're just still going to have to use animal testing. It's impossible in any other way. So there may be a few outliers like that, but in general, I see it pretty much going like animal testing not being a thing, especially in like 150 years. I don't really see that.
Yeah, I would agree with Vidith, and I think personalized medicine is going to be it. There's going to be a way that you're going to be able to interact with some device or something that's going to be able to tell based on your on your genetics and your epigen and all of the things in your environment, like what would be appropriate for you to support your well-being, both physically and mentally, and all of those things. I mean, this is just like I say, who would have known we'd be where we're at with technology that we are today. So maybe it will happen sooner than later. I don't really know. I would love for it to, but certainly I agree that within 100 years, I don't think we'll be relying on animal models.
Interesting. Well, I think for, environmental activists who, really have been pushing for this to kind of start to wind down everything, I think in 100 years, I think those activists will probably be on the happier side, hopefully, if both you and Vidith are correct when it comes to these predictions. So thank you both for sitting on this podcast today. I think we definitely learned a whole lot. I know I did when it comes to this. Again, I was kind of one of those narrow-minded people who only knew maybe one of the components of animal testing. I didn't know full spectrum. So I think it was a great conversation to have. So thank you both for participating, and thank you to those who are listening to this podcast. Next time, we'll be talking about cannabis legislation in the US. So stay tuned to that. And until then, have a great rest of your day.